Hey everybody, episode 8, Bacon and Egg Show, June 6, 2020. Um, don't know exactly how to start off this show. There's a lot going on in our country right now. It's complicated, difficult, um, r- reflective, I think is another good word to use. It, I'm, it, there's a struggle for a lot of people out there. You know, we're going to get into that today. We're going to discuss that and how it's been relating to the sports world. But I mean, who are all humans too. And so, uh, Jay, it's been a crazy week since we last met here. What do you got going on? What's on your mind?
Kerry, I think it's important that last week we filmed a show and we weren't sure how we wanted to address this situation, specifically the murder of George Floyd, and we touched on it at the end of our last show. And now that we've had time to, as Kerry said, reflect, learn more, and really get a good grasp for how this is affecting not just people in the sports world, but around the world in general. We wanted to spend some time at the top of our show today discussing this and addressing the issue of systemic racism in our country. We're going to mostly stick to how it affects the world of sports, or how it has affected the world of sports and what has come from that. But just know that Kerry and I are both going to be working harder to understand what we can do better and learn from this, even though I know I can only speak for myself here, but I feel Kerry is obviously in the same boat. We're on the side of Black Lives Mattering. We're on the side of the police, the system of policing in this country, and the way that it's been going on not being equal for all of our citizens. So just with that being said, we know that we still have things that we can be doing better, and we're going to work on those things. But for now, we're going to talk about how this has affected the sports world and what change has come from that. So Kerry, kind of wanted to start today with the NFL. Some big stuff has come out of the NFL from this, Kerry, and we'll start with the video that came together on social media. Michael Thomas was really the leader of that. And now we know why. There was an employee in the NFL, a social media employee, that was tired of what was going on, was not understanding why the NFL hadn't spoken out, reached out to Michael Thomas directly in a direct message on Instagram and said, hey, I want to arm you with the video. I want to help you make this video and arm you with that so you can say exactly what you think need to be said. What did you think about that video, Kerry?
I thought it was excellent. Um, I mean, it was about as strong of a video as you could probably ask for. I To connect it kind of with what you had mentioned a minute ago about how we wrapped up last show. I think the one thing that's really come into focus over the past week has been that, I know we mentioned at the end of the show last week about, kind of hoping to be a distraction kind of for things that have been, for people to get away from everything going on, whether it's the pandemic, whatever it is, and talking about sports, hopefully being a distraction for that. I think the thing that's really come into focus for me is that there shouldn't be a distraction from this, from this George Floyd murder and everything that's had. That's enough. Like, there should be no more turning a blind eye to it. And as people say on Twitter and all that kind of stuff about, oh, stick to sports. Well, this has a lot to do with sports. It has a lot to do with everything. And that's why I think that video, to connect it back with, Michael Thomas helping facilitate that, was so incredible. Because, and I know we'll get further into this with the Kaepernick protests and I thought it was a very, very well done video. I mean, in terms of, if you just want to talk about star power in the video to really, really bring home the message. I mean, you've got a who's who of the NFL in that video making very clear, you know, what the demands and expectations of the National Football League as a league, what they are. And I think that was the best thing for me. There was, what was just so incredible about it, just the way that it was, this is what we want from the NFL. A very direct message. We want them to address and say that Black Lives Matter. We want them to address, you know, their stance on racism and fighting racism and rooting racism out of the NFL. We want them to um, apologize for silencing their players in the Colin Kaepernick protest, or the protest that stemmed from Kaepernick and the kneeling and all those things, which were never about the flag. And that's another thing we'll get to. But that's what, to me, that was what was so good and well done about that video, was just how the clarity of the message and the demands of the National Football League.
And it served its purpose, because the next day, Roger Goodell, from his basement cam, probably the same one of the same cameras he used for the draft coverage, Roger Goodell came out and said he said a lot of stuff and a lot of good things, but for some of these things to actually come out of the commissioner's mouth, for them to be said, for that to now represent what the shield of the NFL represents at this point, there were some key things that he said that carried more weight than others. For me, he specifically said, "We, the National Football League, admit we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encourage all to speak out and peacefully protest." Important that he said it. Not just because – go ahead. I was going to say –
Oh, no, I was just saying absolutely. Just to actually have the commissioner say that, not a press release and something on a piece of paper or some kind of, to get on camera and look at the camera and say it is huge.
It's very important. But it's also, it's something that the players asked for in that video. They got it. They knew that was necessary in the NFL as a league taking the next step. Something else, another direct quote from that was, "We, the National Football League, believe Black Lives Matter." You could have bet me my house that those words and that exact phrase would have never come out of Roger Goodell's mouth at any given time, ever. That's another thing that was very important, that he, like you said before, wasn't a press release. He said this on video for everybody to see, and that's another thing that needed to be said. The players wanted it. The players got it. It was, and I'll touch on that in a minute. The last thing, Kerry, he said, without Black players, there would be no National Football League.
Yeah.
I mean, again, these are all things, like you said earlier, the weight that they carry, just the fact that he said them, is a step in the right direction. But where does it go from there, Kerry?
Yeah, and there's obviously actions that'll need to be taken to follow up on those words. But I think to actually, another thing that we've kind of learned this week, or kind of come, at least for me, kind of come to the realization too, is that it's not just enough to just say, or just be like, well, I'm not racist, right? Like, I'm not racist. But we're at that point now where that's just not enough. It's not enough for like myself or the National Football League or you or anybody to just be like, well, of course I'm not racist, but I don't, the protests and that's, but it needs to, people that think the way I feel like the feelings that we share about racism and stuff like that, we have to be vocally anti-racist now at this point. And that's where I think this is so important for the NFL to, again, the commissioner on video verbalizing this, to come out and say, without Black players, there would be no National Football League. We are taking this firm of a stance against racism. Black Lives Matter. To get involved, like to actually say those things and actually verbalize it, I think is a step in the right direction. And like you said, we'll see what the actions carry through. If we have a football season this fall, you know, what's going to be the reaction? What's the reaction going to be from owners? If the players say we're going to kneel during the national anthem to continue to bring attention to police brutality and stuff like
And they
that, what's
will.
Jerry Jones going to do? Is he still going to like threaten to? I think he was Jerry Jones that was threatening to fine or, whatever players that were doing that. Like,
Multiple teams. Yep. But
yeah,
Jones was the main one that stood out that really caused that that division to widen at the time.
yeah. So like, if we're talking about the league wanting to actually take meaningful action on this, the first owner that tries to discipline a player or make some kind of issue out of a player peacefully protesting, where does the NFL and Roger Goodell step in and say you need to back off and you need to allow, you're on the wrong side of this? That's what I'm going to be watching for whenever there is resistance to the protesting and the bringing of attention to these issues by the players, whether it's fans acting a certain way, owners acting a certain way, coaches that may have friends in high places that may try to, I'm not talking about Bill Belichick or anything like that, but like, that would try to discipline a player for acting a certain way. Where does the league
Right.
come in and try to set that right? And that's what I'm
Well,
waiting to see.
they don't have an option at this point. Like
No, they don't.
you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, man. Like this is out
No.
now. Like they don't have any choice but to back it up. And speaking of not having any choice, did the NFL have any choice but to release that video at this point?
I mean, I think our surprise, if you will, at the actual video itself speaks to that. I feel like, yes, I think they had to do it. I think they had to do it. But I think the NFL could have done, like we were talking about, they could have put some press release out from Roger Goodell addressing this and said, hey, we've done our part. We said what we had to say and let's move on from it as an NFL family and all that kind of stuff. The usual kind of like what you're seeing from a lot of other sports teams and leagues and corporations and whoever it is that's just putting something out on social media and just saying, oh, well, of course we're not racist, moving on.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Not denouncing hate, not saying that Black Lives Matter,
yeah,
not taking those steps, but just, oh guys, everybody should be equal. Let's be, but
yeah,
no, like the point is, and now the more I'm thinking about it now, like at the beginning of the show, I wasn't sure how I wanted to say that we were on the side of Black Lives Matter, and I feel like I'm thinking about it right now that I sort of stuttered through that, and it wasn't a very forceful saying, and like that to me is the sort of thing like when we see a company that puts out a half-ass effort at that, that's not how I want that, what I was saying at the beginning of the show to be, I don't want that to be a representation of how I feel, because I feel very forcefully that Black Lives Matter. But I think that the half-ass approach that some of these companies are taking, they might as well not even be putting anything out at all.
exactly. Like, what's the use? Because all it does is you just come off as, a pandering shill. It's just well, yeah, let's release a statement to make sure we don't lose any business dollars over it, but don't you don't want to piss off anybody that you might want to lose business from. Like, it's beyond that point now, and that's where, and we can go in a different direction and have a deeper, much deeper conversation this aspect. But in terms of like the protesting, like, what other option is there at this point? It's there has to be a forceful and united message that like this shit's, it's got to be done. Like, it's time for it to be over. And people are like, oh, well, they're just going about it the wrong way. Well, it got your attention, didn't it? And that's where, it's I'm glad that corporations or sports teams or individuals are being held to task over not just, saying like I mentioned earlier, just being able to go like, well, I'm not racist. Okay, well, that's fine. You're probably not. Most people aren't. But it's time to step up and take some action.
Right.
Be an ally about it. Should prove that, be an anti-racist, not just, non-racist. And that's what, to go back to your point, to kind of bring that back around is like, I think the NFL could have done much less and tried to just continue moving down the road. So I am glad that they are addressing it. And again, actions will speak as we get further into this. But like, um, I mean, if you compare it to the other major sports, I think what the NFL did, and maybe it is a nature of being a predominantly black league, and we already know where kind of Adam Silver in the NBA has been on social justice issues over the years. They've been supportive of their players. Like, I don't think we need to hear something from Adam Silver in the NBA to go, oh, okay, we know where they stand on things. So I am glad that the NFL has done it, and I don't think they had to do it. So
Isn't it a shame though that we still have to think about the fact that the NFL hadn't taken a stance like this? Like the fact that we're in 2020 and the NFL was still. It took something like this. It took something like the uprising, the protesting, the riots in some cases, which I'm not saying that that's the way to go about it, but those are a part. That's the riots are a part of this bigger conversation. You know, we're still having to say, oh wow, the NFL had to come out and say that they're not a racist entity. That by the way, we wouldn't exist without the black guys. It feels like to me, and I'm gonna tell you, I talked to our friend Mike Holland last night, our Longhorn insider, and I asked him, I said, so would this have been, how do you take this? Would this have been better if it would have come earlier? And he goes, obviously, the timing of this feels like they had no choice but to make a statement. But the fact that it came, okay, you said it now. What are you going to do?
yeah,
But
it was swift and it was direct, and that's
yeah. But he did say like the fact that it took something like this for it to happen does cheapen it a little for him as a black man. So I mean that's
yeah.
and I get where he's coming from. I could understand where he's coming
Yeah,
from.
and again, to kind of think back to to connect this with the NBA and how Adam Silver in that league has approached social justice issues. Um, that's why we haven't had to hear from them right now, because a few years ago during the Kaepernick protests and the controversy of the NFL protests, with Roger Goodell and owners basically pandering to the federal government, over there being fussy over players taking a knee before a football game. Um, the NBA basically drew their line in the sand at that point. We've known where they've stood. And that's why I think, like, yeah, of course it would have been great to hear from the NFL earlier, but like, if they had taken a stand a few years ago and been supportive of their players and didn't blackball Colin Kaepernick out of the National Football League, maybe we'd be a little bit more forgiving about when and how these statements would have come from the league. But because of all that, that's why I think there is kind of a natural like surprise over what Goodell did in response to the Michael Thomas video. So
No, I agree, and there's something to be said that they actually did it, and there's something to be said for the importance of the exact phrases and words coming out of Roger Goodell's mouth. But like we there's always been a lot of talk, not to this level of the NFL that they can no longer go back on, but there's always been talk and not a lot of action. So we're going to see truly if these powerful words that Roger Goodell said, are going to be backed up, and I think they will, because there is no other option. There is not at this
there's
point.
not.
So if for any other reason, whatever, they're doing it, and it's going to happen because it has to happen, and the league will adjust accordingly, and that's good. That means that the protests, that everything that's come from this, is making change for the better, and that's why protesting is so important, and people getting out and voicing their rights, or that their rights are being violated, their people's rights are being violated on a regular basis. It's happening for the good. Change is happening for the good.
Absolutely. And related to that, talking about words and where people stand, Drew Brees this week, um, in an interview, was asked if and I don't have this verbatim right here in front of me, but it was essentially asked, given your opposition to the kneeling and the Colin Kaepernick situation from 2016, I think is what it was. You were against that then, Drew. If there was this football season, if players decide to kneel during the national anthem, given what we've seen and people know now, and the clarity over what those protests were all about, would you be supportive of that? And Breeze's answer was essentially, um, I will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag and the troops. It was in the question. It was in the question.
Right.
Given what we know now, which means basically, like, given that those protests were never, ever about the flag, and it was never about the troops and disrespecting of the military and, you know, anti-patriotism. It's just a dog whistle, right? Breeze's answer to this, like, basically, it's just say like, well, and we'll get. I know you want to address what his new teammate Malcolm Jenkins had to say about that, but I mean, that's
Yes.
basically all it is. Like, this whole like flag worship and troop worship thing has nothing to do with the protests. I think that's just a convenient excuse for Breeze to basically, as Malcolm Jenkins gets to say, and like, they're asking for help the wrong way. Breeze is in this position. Malcolm Jenkins puts it as like, we have all these issues. Black people are trying to expose these systemic problems and violence and murder in the streets. But people like Breeze go, don't ask us for help that way. And then you try to peacefully protest. Well, don't ask us that way. Okay, well then we'll go protest in the streets. Oh, don't ask us that way. Okay, well we might have to break some windows and cause a little bit of trouble. Don't ask that way. Do people like Breeze really want to be asked for help? Is what I'm getting at.
No, I get what you're saying. I had a conversation like that. I broke my own rule and went into the comment section on my own Facebook post. I broke my own rule the other day, and I responded to an old classmate of mine, and it was basically like her entire point was that she has a black police officer brother. Her brother is black and is a police officer, and the and she also has lost family in the military. Which before I responded to her, I said, I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it's like to have a black brother. I don't know what it's like to have a black brother that's a cop, and I don't know what it's like to lose a family member in the military. So, I was sorry that she's had, that she works with all of those things, has had to deal with those things in her life and go through whatever that means to her. But the fact that, she couldn't see that what this was about, what these protests are about right now, are not about disrespecting people that are doing things the right way. It's about going after the people that aren't, and being loud enough to make sure that people know that it's a problem, and people want to be heard, and people, this is not about it. It bothers me, man, because you and I talk a lot about this and about the flag worshiping and the troop worshiping, and like how it is for that to be the mindset that people have, and not think of it from a broader perspective in terms of people's lives are being affected here in our own country, and we aren't doing enough to fix it. It's not my problem that's not, you don't understand that. It's not my problem that that your mindset isn't, well, all of these people matter, and we need to fix that part of our society in general and the police force in general, so we can all start to share the same things. And if you don't feel that way, then I'm sorry, but that's how I felt, and that was sort of what I was trying to get, the point that I wanted to get across from my post that I'd made that day. But also, that's who I am, and I want to do a better job of making sure that people understand exactly where I stand.
Yeah, I, and that's the thing. Breeze tried to make this point about like, oh, both my grandfathers fought in World War II, so like, just the pride that I have behind the flag and all those things. And I mean, Malcolm Jenkins said, I believe he said his grandfather also fought in World War II. Yet Shannon Sharp, you know, this week basically say like he had family that fought in the military. Everybody, so many people in this country had people that had grandparents or whoever that fought in wars, which is amazing. And this isn't taking anything away from that, but it's Breeze trying to co-opt that his grandparents fought in World War II. Shannon Sharp's point was like, well, that's great, but and also Malcolm Jenkins made the point of, well, when their grandfathers fought in those wars, they came back to a country that treated them as others. They fought for that same flag. They had people die in those same trenches and on those same battlefields. So don't, and that's the thing. It's just people I think are just high, like they hold up the flag and the military is some kind of shield for their own feelings of wanting, keep those people over there, keep them kind of separate from me. They all fought for the same shit. They were over there fighting the same battle. But Breeze's grandparents are able to come back and enjoy the fruits of being veterans and being able to live in a country that treated them as heroes. Malcolm Jenkins' grandfathers didn't have that luxury, and neither did Shannon Sharp's or a lot of people, black veterans that went over there to fight that came back and were treated terribly. I mean, I think even Jesse Owens said something similar about participating in the Berlin Olympics. Oh well, it must be crazy over there competing against, in Berlin with the Nazis and everything. He's like, I've been treated better over here than I am back home. That was in the 30s.
Yeah, I mean, and we look at what's happening today, and nothing's changed. Like, I think there are more good people now. I think there are more good people in all aspects of life, in all walks of life. I think every time we see an uprising from the citizens, it really starts with the youth, and every time it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and more young people are getting more and more involved. And every single one of these, not every single one, but a lot of the protests, a lot of the movements that we've seen were started by young people. And that, as the farther that we get along, where more and more young people are embracing these protests and embracing the mindset of everybody truly having equal rights, then we will continue to weed out. There will always be people that, for whatever reason, won't be on board. But these protests that are happening, and as many people that feel like now finally I want to share my story. I want to share the things that I go through on an everyday basis. It's not like it hasn't happened before, but so much now. People don't have you have to make a conscious decision to not listen. You have to
Right.
try to not listen to what's happening right now and what's going on.
Exactly.
You have to make a point to not want it. And that's the frustrating part about a lot of this.
Well, and that's the frustrating thing on the Drew Brees point, was that that's a he could have just had no comment, or like, when your other option is to just say nothing, but you still opt to say something that, you know, I know he apologized the next day, a very well crafted PR apology about, look at my work in the community, and obviously I'm an ally and I always have been. And this is a point Shannon Sharp made about, the rest of the Saints after this team meeting and his apology were like, everything's fine, we're going to move on from this. And like Michael Thomas said, it's back to the movement, it's back to work. Apology accepted. But Shannon Sharp's point was like, he revealed himself. He revealed himself, and he can apologize for that, and they can be all cool and all that stuff. But the next time in the middle of the season, if there's a bad, they're in a bad spot and there's a moment of leadership that's needed, those guys are going to look at him in that room a different way, because he revealed it. And that's fine. That's how he feels. That's how he feels. But it's, uh, you know,
There's a
it's
quote. And I know it might be Maya Angelou. I hope I'm not screwing this up, but it's one of those things where it's like, if somebody shows you who they are, believe them.
yeah,
And to me, I don't want to say that if somebody shows you who they are one time, they can't change for the better and learn and create a new mindset for themselves. But in this situation, if somebody continuously shows you who they are, it's repeated. This isn't a one-time thing. If somebody shows you who they are on multiple occasions, spread out
right,
over time,
right,
that's who they are. And
right.
and, and I 100% agree that nobody will look at him in the same way in that locker room moving forward because of that. So I think that you're spot on there in that moment of leadership. You know, we may be hearing from Michael Thomas being that leader, Malcolm Jenkins, who, by the way, in one of my favorite quotes of the week, at the end of Malcolm Jenkins' statement, told Breeze plainly, shut the fuck up.
Exactly. He would have been better off just not saying anything.
Yep.
And
So, I
that's
mean, again, and from, for the teammates to go, Michael Thomas saying, Michael Thomas is quote saying he don't know no better, like it's the last thing on this, and this is something that we could talk about. The double standard between when black athletes speak up and when white athletes speak up in this country. You have people, like, and I don't agree with LeBron James on everything, but LeBron James has been very outspoken, and at least from a standpoint of speaking out for his community and speaking out for better treatment of the black community, and I'll give him that for sure.
well on that point,
Yeah.
isn't that the whole? And I know I have a feeling I know where you're going on this, but like everybody should be able to speak their mind, right? Whether you agree with them or not. You should,
Absolutely.
everybody, and I think everybody that watches this show, or everybody that claims to be a lover of freedom or anything in the United States, or a lover of the Constitution or First Amendment, all those things, everybody should be able to speak their mind whether you disagree with it or not.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, 100%. And then freedom of speech is not the same as freedom of dealing with the consequences of your speech. So
Exactly.
if you want to put yourself out there and say that you think that kneeling for the flag is disrespectful to the country and the troops, you can say that. I love that you have the right to say that. I'm going to disagree with you wholeheartedly, and but you have the right to say that. I think you do know where I'm going with this, is when you have somebody like LeBron James who speaks up, or any black athlete that has spoken up. There's been so many that have spoken up and spoken out against racial injustice in this country, not just now, but prior as well. And you get to shut up and dribble treatment. You get to shut up and throw the ball, shut up and swing a bat
Stick
instead
to
of
sports.
the stick to sports crowd, which unsurprisingly, is mostly from what had to be deemed an entertainment channel because they couldn't legally call themselves news with Fox News. This is the Laura Ingrams of the world, and I shouldn't have even said her name, given her the satisfaction of saying her name, but that's the person that is so famous for the shut up and dribble stuff. And then Drew Brees comes out and says this and says, well, he should be allowed to have an opinion. You're right, he should be allowed to have an opinion. And so should everybody else that spoke up against racial injustice when you denounced that and said that they should shut up and play their sport.
Yeah. I wonder what the double standard is based on in that situation. I'm
I
curious.
can't I can't
I couldn't
imagine
imagine
what
what the difference would be between Drew Brees and LeBron James or Kevin Durant or
yeah,
Colin Kaepernick. Like, what could be the difference? I'm curious.
shocking to me.
Yeah,
Like
stunning.
and the thing about it is that there are people that still can't put that together, that still don't understand why that's wrong. And it's very frustrating to me, which is why it's so important that we continue to speak out, that we continue to talk about these things, so more and more people have a general understanding, well, maybe what I'm feeling isn't the right way to feel about things. And that's
Yeah.
why this stuff is important that we keep talking about it.
Yeah, and to bridge that over, to bring it a little more local, Tom Herman had a pretty direct. I mean, how would you describe the statement? It wasn't a statement. This was Tom Herman. I believe it was an interview. Was this with Colin Cowherd? I think he was doing an interview and said all this. This wasn't like a crafted PR statement from Belmont that was, this is where the University of Texas football program stands on these issues. But he had just some incredible things to say that we'll get into kind of some different coaches that have spoken on this, but I was really impressed and happy with what Tom Herman had to say about this. To kind of go on this double standard, I think that's a perfect way to bridge into this. But the quote was, "You can't cheer for them when they score touchdowns and then treat them differently when they aren't playing football."
It's pretty to the point.
There was a lot more to it, in
No, there
terms of,
was. Yeah,
you know,
but that's the point. Is a simple statement like that should resonate with people. And if you think about that and you don't understand it, you need to figure something out in your life. It is a very basic and clear statement. You cannot cheer for them on Saturdays when they're scoring touchdowns and then treat them differently every other day of the week when you see them walking on the streets or around campus. You can't do it. It doesn't make any sense for you to do that. So basically, like, don't cheer them and then treat them that way. We don't want that. Make yourself be better. And Tom Herman's short, concise, clear statement, just that one statement, it speaks volumes. And I agree with you. I was very, very happy with that. Not just that, but then also the follow through, and the days after, and the march that he and the rest of the team took from the stadium down Congress to the Capitol, in a showing solidarity amongst the team, and in a form of protest.
black and white players.
Right. Yeah.
Black, and that's, um, I think it was a big. Uh, there's, I think, a lot of layers to this that we can get into a bit later, but I think, given the history of the University of Texas, given the history and the legacy, or the notoriety of being the last all-white national championship football team, the 1970, I think it was the 1969 team, and to, I don't know. I think that not that this was necessarily intended, but I think the symbology and kind of the meaning behind, um, the head coach of the University of Texas, with the statement that he had, the show of solidarity with the players, the march to the Capitol, uh, encouraging all of his players. I don't have the exact quote here, but basically saying, you have a unique platform. You play football for one of the biggest brands, one of the biggest identities in the country. It's the University of Texas. Use your voice. You have an opportunity to use your voice, use the platform that you have to keep pushing for these kinds of changes. I, I think it's a, we don't know how many games Tom Herman's going to win at Texas. We don't know what the rest of his tenure is going to look like. We just don't know. Well, as we talked about on the show, the jury's still kind of out on Tom Herman as the head football coach at this university. I think if he, no matter what happens with that, I think he has his spot in the history books at this school. And I think it's an important one that he bridged that kind of. It doesn't undo everything, you know, the history and everything over at UT, but it does a lot to show going forward. And I think it carries a lot of weight. I don't know. Like I said, there's a deeper discussion that we can have about the history of UT, and with Tom Herman, everything that went down with this. But I think it's really impressive, and I'm really, um, really pleased to see them take the lead on this.
Yeah. And the last thing with Herman, the other thing that stood out to me was his quote: "More than ever, our society needs a systemic overhaul, and it starts with the way minorities are treated, implicitly and explicitly, in this country." Again, a very clear statement from a leader, and that's something that this country has sorely missed recently, is leadership. And for that team and the players on that team to know that they have a leader that truly has their back and truly feels that there needs to be a systemic change in this country, I think it does speak a lot for Herman. I think, whether or not he keeps his job next year, after this season, at this point in time, is irrelevant. This is a conversation about things that are bigger than football. And Herman did a really, really nice job, or has handled this and has done a really, really nice job with this so far. And I think he'll continue to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we can, like you said, there's a different discussion to be had about football. I don't think that, there is question about about him as a football coach. I don't think there's been any question since he arrived at Texas, and even before that, about the care that he has for his players. He's a guy that said he didn't have a father, himself. He's always tried to be there for his players of all races and of all backgrounds and all those things. And I think he's done an incredible job um, being genuine about that. I mean, it's not so. But
Well,
I think what Texas has done, whether it's Shaka Smart, who spoke out on these things a few years ago. I think it was his first season at Texas. He spoke out about um, racial inequality and all those things, and he was basically given the "shut up and coach"
right.
spiel from the public. Um, so I'm glad that people like Shaka Smart now, there's more of that freedom to be able to finally say things that need to be said. And if someone has a problem with it, well, too bad.
Yeah, tough shit. Lincoln Riley, the coach in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's Oklahoma, okay. But Lincoln Riley coming out, tweeting using the Black Lives Matter hashtag, and then doubling back down when people questioned him, like he knew what happened, and saying, "Guys, this is a personal belief of mine. So, of course, I'm going to, say that this is how I feel. I'm not going to not tell you how I feel. This is a personal belief of mine." And then another quote from Lincoln Riley. He said, "All lives can't matter until Black lives do too." So, you're getting that sort of leadership from head coaches some places. In other places like Florida State, you have Mike Norvell, who came out and said there was a lot of open communication and individual conversations with players. His star defensive tackle, Marvin Wilson, came out and said that
Houston
shit did
Episcopal,
not
by the
happen.
way, to tie that in with our discussion with Longhorn insider Michael Holland, another recruit that Texas missed on from Houston Episcopal. Just wanted to make sure we tie that together there.
Yeah. And he's there in Florida State now, and he's not happy with the way that his coach has handled this. Norvell hasn't coached a game at Florida State, right?
No, no.
So
He took the job this offseason, leaving Memphis. I think did he? I don't want to, but did he pull the whole leaving before the bowl game thing from Memphis to take the FSU job? I don't.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I
Well,
would bet that
it
he
doesn't
did,
matter
but
too
I'm
much in
not
this
sure.
scenario. But yes, he has not coached a single game at Florida State, and I don't know if he. Well, we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, especially with this player of Marvin Wilson's caliber, like that carries weight. It's not the 105th guy walk on saying this is the star player. This is probably easily your best defensive player. So, coach, good luck getting this team rolling and behind you to start your coaching uh, uh, to start coaching at FSU.
Well, and also Dabo Swinney at Clemson had an interesting week.
Oh, Dabo.
This one's complicated. I mean, he basically took the biblical stance of, we just need more forgiveness and more, um, you know, just more God, and we'll be able to get through all this. I
It's such bullshit, man. Like,
he's also had an issue, apparently a story that came out this week. One of his assistant coaches used a racial slur on a player in the middle of practice, and it was basically handled internally with the coaches, and no no reprimands, which the Dabo thing's interesting to me. I know Bomani Jones had an interesting point about someone like Dabo that essentially has never been anywhere besides Alabama or South Carolina. You know, poor kid from the
really
country.
though.
No, but
Yeah,
he's a poor. He came
yeah.
up, economically disadvantaged. Like a lot of the kids that he recruits. And a guy like Dabo truly believes that everybody, if he can do it, anybody can do it, and that if you don't, all it takes is some faith and hard work, and you can come up out of any situation that you can. But he's wrong in that. I know he truly believes that, and I know he truly believes that the players and stuff that he recruits from South Carolina and Georgia and all over the country that come up out of disadvantaged situations can do what he did. But he's wrong, and that the reason is because if Dabo was black, he wouldn't be the head coach at Clemson. he
No,
wouldn't
not
be
a
floated
chance.
as the head coach, potential future replacement of Nick Saban at Alabama. And you know, you can work and bust your ass all you want, but that's the whole point of all this thing, is that there's a different set of rules and a different advantages in place for even someone like Dabo Swinney coming out of where he came from. And forgiveness and, you know, just a little old hard work isn't going to fix all this. And that's where I think, you know, just the disconnect with, I mean, does he not see the situations that his black players face versus his white players? I mean, that's where I'm just confused on this, on this. Like, is he that?
It's amazing how people are wired sometimes that they can't get off of a certain frame of mind. And he probably does think that anybody can come from nothing like he did and be successful. And it's sad that if he truly can't see that, just by the for the sheer fact that his skin was white gave him an advantage over any person that is a person of color. It's sad, really, that people have that mindset, that people can't understand that your white skin has enabled you to have. I know you've worked very hard. I know, he's worked hard to get to where he is. He's done all of those things. He has worked hard.
Yeah, that's not taken away from
But
anything that he's been able to accomplish. That,
no,
you
but how
know,
many black coaches have worked just as hard as he have and not gotten the opportunities solely because they were black? There are, I mean, Charlie Strong is the black head coach. There are black head coaches. I'm not saying that that's not achievable, but if you look across the landscape of college, not just college football, not just football, professional sports, when you look at the percentage of black head coaches as opposed to white head coaches, there is I don't have to know the exact percentages to know that the gap is huge.
well, and that's what
So,
I think on the
and like
Goodell.
above 90% sort of thing, like
Yeah,
huge.
yeah, and like on the Goodell point about, if without black players, there's no National Football League. I mean, I think it's at least 70% of the players in the league are black. What's the percentage of black head coaches?
Well, there are
The
two. Tomlin.
Flores in Miami, um, LA Chargers, Anthony Lynn, and is that about
So
it?
three or
I
four.
mean,
I can't think of anybody else off the top.
it's not
And I
70%.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's
exactly.
not
So you
because
got
these guys
32
don't work
teams, and
hard.
you got 32 teams. You got 3 head coaches. You can do the math. It's yeah, exactly. It's not because they're not capable and they don't work hard. So yeah, I mean it's sad that Dabo, if that is his mindset, which I hope it's not, that he can't see past that. It's really a shame because he has the ability, as with his platform, to make a huge difference, and it's disheartening.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. This isn't, again, it goes back to the, I don't think Dabo's ever done anything or said anything that suggests that he himself is a racist.
Right.
That's not the conversation here, which a lot of people just bounce back and go, well, Dabo's not a racist. That's not what we're saying.
No, that's not
You
enough to
know,
just not say racist things.
exactly. This is a point in time where he need, someone like Dabo, like you said, with his privileged position, the advantages that he has, needs to be outwardly anti-racist and supportive of his players and supportive of, you know, the community in general. You know, but to kind of staying related to that, um, I did want to bring up something real quick about uh, hockey's response to this. Out of the major North American sports, hockey is the whitest. I mean, I don't think there's any real debate about that. It's the numbers speak for themselves. Over the past couple years, there's been a couple of incidents involving players in the National Hockey League and also the AHL. Coaches have lost jobs over the last couple years over using racial slurs towards players. Hockey has a problem with that. and that's something that's been discussed in the hockey community the last couple of years. But I wanted to point out something. As we were talking about these corporations and teams or players or whatever putting out these kind of packaged responses. USA Hockey, the organization that oversees all hockey in the United States, from the men's and women's national teams that compete at the Olympics, to beer league players like myself that have to sign up for a paying USA Hockey membership on a yearly basis, to youth players, the complete umbrella. They put out their statement about, we condemn racism and we're going to do everything we can to, help support, minority communities and make hockey a friendlier place and all that. But then it was also brought to USA Hockey's attention that their assistant executive director of operations is John Van Beesbroek. Some people that are familiar with hockey might remember him from the 90s. He was a goalie that took the Florida Panthers on a run to the Stanley Cup Finals. And, this is a guy that has been part of the USA Hockey community for a long, long time. Problem is he left his job as a major junior coach, which are players up to the age of 17, I believe. And it's essentially a feeder system for players in the NHL draft. He left his job over calling Trevor Daley the N-word, the captain of the team, in front of the entire squad and all that, and just walked away from the job. Not long after that, he gets hired to a general manager role with another major junior team. And then after that, and it was just a couple years ago, he was hired as the assistant executive director of operations for USA Hockey. That's a problem. That's a problem. And that is to talk about the different. Colin Kaepernick lost his job as an NFL player for starting silent, peaceful protests to bring these kinds of things to attention. He hasn't been able to get another job as a player. His football career is effectively done. I doubt anybody will ever bring him on as a coach. I doubt he'll ever go into any kind of executive role or position, anything like that. His football career in the world of football for him is toast. John Van Beesbroek leaves his job after using a racial slur, and he ends up being the assistant executive director for the entire umbrella organization that oversees hockey in this country.
You got a promotion.
He got a promotion. And this was not something that like a month ago or in this past week someone goes, do you realize that he did this? This has been open. This has been an open thing for years with him. And it just goes exactly to that point. If you want to see what people of different backgrounds and of different colors, the advantages that they have built in for them, there's your case. And if you want to talk about a sport, but also we're talking about the NFL as blackballed Kaepernick. So what's really the difference? Is this a hockey issue? Is this an NFL issue? Or is this a societal issue? And I think we know the answer to that. And I think that's why we're seeing what we're seeing.
Yeah, and I think USA Hockey they'll be forced. Their hand will be forced here. I don't think they have an option. Again, companies are going to have to cut ties with people that they would have normally not cut ties with before, even though they probably should have. But because some of this stuff is getting brought up, I think they'll be forced. I remember Van Beesbroek. I'm not a hockey guy, but I remember him playing. I remember watching the Stanley Cup Finals, and I remember that name. And for a very, very casual hockey fan, for me to remember that name but not know the history behind it, at least in the last few years, because I haven't, I don't pay attention to that stuff. But now I feel like I should have known this, and I feel like, it's important. I think my point is that it's important that we are always continuing to learn about these things and looking for ways that we can say, hey, this isn't right. And that's what people are doing right now with USA Hockey, as they should. And I think more and more of this will be coming out. You got players on Oregon State's team that were kicked off of the team for audio that was 3 years old. There are these skeletons in these closets that maybe people knew about and know about. They're going to be amplified in this time. and people are going to be forced to deal with the consequences of those actions. And I hope that USA Hockey takes the correct steps here to ensure that they can move forward from this.
Yeah, a little side note to that, he was inducted to the United States Hockey Hall of Fame uh, just a couple years after the incident involving Trevor Daley while he
After,
was,
right?
yeah.
After. Right. It's a
Um,
problem there, people. That's a problem.
that's a problem. And I know that, there'll be some people that say, well, hey, I don't want to have one mistake or one thing held against me. Or, or like you mentioned earlier, some people might show their heart one way. You don't want to hold a first impression or one single kind of incident against them. My counter argument, if someone says something that's, if they make, say something of that sort in the John Van Beesbrook thing or whatever, and they don't want that to be held against them for the rest of their lives, my argument is I don't think a person should be at threat of being killed at any moment by a police officer just based on the color of their skin.
Yeah.
You're going to hold that against one incident, one kind of thing where over
Right.
that?
And I we're not sitting. I know you and I aren't sitting here saying that we're perfect. That
No.
that's not what this is about. This is about knowing that what we have to do is if you are called on something, you have to acknowledge it, you have to accept it, and you have to learn from it. And people are willing to forgive if you show that you are truly taking those steps to be better. I'm not saying that people won't forgive Drew Brees, his teammates won't forgive him, because they'll probably forgive him. But the point is they won't look at him exactly the same again.
Well,
And I go ahead.
well, no, just real quick. I was just going to say, I think what's important for Breeze in this case is what his actions are going to be going forward. If the things that he said he was going to do in his apology, about being an ally and doing all these things, like if he follows through on those kinds of things and he like actually takes on an active role and it becomes support and all the, like, I think that's amazing. And that's the kind of stuff that needs to happen. It's not so much about like, if you say the wrong thing or if and you get called on it, if you run off into your shell and put up a guard and just dig yourself even deeper, well, then you are revealing yourself. But if you're big enough to grow from it and, realize the position that you're in to be helpful and be active and, provide support, and you go on from there, then you're fine. Like, it's all good kind of thing. I mean, it's just it's such a simple concept that, it's amazing that it's like we have to go so deep into it, but it's
Right.
such a simple concept.
The simple statements some of these simple statements that we talked about earlier, the simple concept of understanding what everybody's lives meaning the same, or should mean be
Yeah.
everybody's lives should mean the same. That's a very simple thing to comprehend, and it is being made, for some reason it's being made seem like it's very difficult to grasp, and it's not. It's truly not difficult at all for me to grasp that. And I wish that more people would just slowly think about this topic and take everything about it in, and truly ask themselves that question: well, am I doing enough? Is what I thought before, is that the way I should be thinking? And until everybody addresses that and makes a change, it's going to, there will be a lot of change. There will be a lot of good that will come from this, Kerry. I know we truly feel that way. We have to show it, though, and people that have made mistakes in the past have to show it. They have to, and everybody has to show it. This isn't a me and you thing. This isn't a those two people down the street thing. This is an all of us thing, and that's the way it has to be.
Yeah. I mean, if I step outside right now and my neighbor's house is on fire and they come to me asking for help, I'm not going to look at them and go, all houses matter.
Right? There's a house on fire. It
There's a
needs to
house
be
on
put out.
fire that we need as a white person in Austin, Texas, that needs to help. And,
Yep.
that's where people would get the whole like, well, all lives matter kind of. Well, come on, like we won't dig too deep into that, but like it's just such an absurd kind of stance. I think like what you mentioned Lincoln Riley saying like all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter. You get everybody on the level playing field. Now we're
Yeah,
talking about something different.
then we can have that conversation. But
Yeah,
in no way, shape, or form is there a level playing field right now.
right.
No, and to suggest that is foolish and it's ignorant. Whether it's you're ignorant by choice or just because that's the environment that you were brought up in and that's what you were taught. I mean, that to me is it's a simple thing that we should all be grasping. I wanted to make sure, Kerry, that we talked about the Texans and how they handled
Yeah,
some of this stuff this week.
yeah.
So George Floyd's funeral is June 9th. The Texans aren't holding any team meetings that day in order to allow the players to attend the funeral if they choose. We give Bill O'Brien a lot of shit on this show and in general, just in any everyday conversation. But the way that he's handled this, and not just this time, which, that the 12 or 13-minute speech that he gave on a teleconference really, again, reiterated the type of man and the type of character that he has, the type of man that he is, and how I feel he truly does feel about his players as men, and the systemic problems that we have in this country, how much he does believe that it exists. The problem is, Kerry, is that he's the head coach at a franchise that a couple of years ago had the quote, and Bob McNair has since passed away, but before that, in 2017, he was the owner that had the infamous, "We can't have the inmates running the prison," when owners were having the discussion about the kneeling and the peaceful protests. So for an organization from an ownership standpoint, that was the message 3 years ago. And even though Bill O'Brien stood by his players and said, he stood by them then, but from the top, from ownership, we were getting a different message. What do you think about O'Brien, again, doubling down on this, really reiterating how he feels and the strong stance that he took and has, again, decided to take it to
I
show
think it's
himself?
great. I think it's great. Like you mentioned, we give Bill O'Brien a lot of shit as a general manager, as a head coach, as an offensive coordinator,
Yeah.
as a quarterbacks coach, as a defensive coordinator, as a special teams coordinator,
Head
as
bottle washer.
head bottle washer, head custodial engineer of NRG Stadium.
Yeah.
Uh,
Head
I think
trainer. Did we say that? Yeah.
head trainer. I think he's also God. What is he doing? Is he like treasurer for Harris County or something at this point as well? Like we give him a lot of shit, and football wise, rightfully so. I mean, it's we won't get into that Kansas City playoff game. We've been there, but that's we give him shit for that. I think back to when they were on Hard Knocks and the little inner peek that we got of Bill O'Brien's home life. He has a son with disabilities. He's a caring father. I think it is a true reflection, like you said, of how much he cares for his players. I think he's a good guy. I don't think there's any question about that. I think he's shown that. I think it was back to kind of like the Goodell thing. Uh, Bill O'Brien didn't have to have this long call. He didn't have to put this kind of statement. He didn't have to get out there and say what he said. He didn't have to do any of that. And there are plenty of coaches around the NFL that haven't. That some have been completely silent on this. Um, Not just Bill Belichick, but you know, plenty of them have had
He's
absolutely
definitely one of
zero.
them.
He's one of them that have had absolutely zero to say. So Bill O'Brien didn't have to do this, and I think that he did. It says a lot about him. I know that he has issues or has had issues getting along with certain players, and that's why they've left town. Um, but I think that's in a football sense. I don't think it's ever been anything about him being as far as we know,
Right.
a bad guy. I'm glad he did it. I don't know. You mentioned, Bob McNair, passing away. I'm curious to see, as we kind of connected this with our discussion earlier about how are the owners going to handle this if players start to protest. I'm interested what Cal McNair's stance is, and I think that'd be interesting to see. Um, kind of where the Texans organization, um, you know, not just the owner Bill O'Brien, but co-owner Cal McNair also, you know, stands on this. So
Yeah. I mean, and I think there's a reason that Cal McNair hasn't said anything yet, because, and I don't know anything. I mean, obviously, let me start over with this because I want to make sure that I'm clear. I'm very pleased with what Bill O'Brien came out and said. I think that as a person, we know the type of coach that we have in Houston. We don't agree with his football stuff all the time, but that's, again, we said it earlier and we'll say it again, that this is bigger than football. If you're going to have a head coach, I want a head coach that's going to come out and say what he said.
yeah,
Uh, and I was very happy with that, man. I mean, it's difficult knowing the history that the ownership's family has brought with insensitivity and things of that nature. But no matter what, O'Brien has stuck to his guns here. I don't know how Cal McNair is going to respond, but I have a feeling he'll respond how he's told to respond by the league, because there's going to have to be a united front here. Because if there's not, it's not going to work. So I feel like that owners are not saying anything because they're all going to have to say something at one time. Otherwise, what the league said, what the NFL said earlier in this week, it can really do a lot to harm that. And I don't believe that the league will let it happen. If at least they shouldn't, if they care about making this progress really count.
well said. Well said. I mean, that's what we just have to see what the actions are from the league and the ownership, and we shall see. But Jay, let's no, we can go on that. We can keep going on this for the next week. I know that we wanted to hit on the other little bit of news that's been affecting us, and that is the coronavirus pandemic, which is still ongoing.
It's still
Um,
happening, right?
it's still happening.
Yeah, still a
Um,
thing.
yeah, that it's still something that we're all dealing with, and you know, I'd say let's just keep rolling along here. If you want to, let's get into the coronavirus stuff and kind of hit on that. What's going on. I know Governor Abbott mentioned, or I didn't just mention it. I think it's actually official. I know with bars and restaurants, it's back to 50% capacity, um, and apparently professional college sports can go to 50% capacity now. What do you think?
Right. Well, I mean, again, this isn't affecting me because I'm not going. I think it's foolish at this point to say, like, we could, if at Darrell K. Royal Texas Memorial Stadium, if we could say, hey, guys, in August, we know that we're going to be able to put 50,000 people in that stadium. I think that's foolish to say that at this point. But we'll see where it goes. Again, these aren't things that are nothing is happening right now. No fans are in stands at this point. So I don't think that it's as big of a deal to worry about. But I think that really, if you think about putting 50,000 people in a stadium right now, it's kind of foolish.
Yeah, doesn't sound right.
Well, especially since this week 5 Alabama players tested positive for
Yeah,
coronavirus after returning to campus for workouts. I mean, this is still a very real thing that is happening in our country. There's a lot going on with the protests, and you see people so close together. And I think maybe people's minds have switched off a little bit. We're still in the middle of a global pandemic, and we have to be aware of these things. So, what do you think about how this is starting to unravel, at least in the state of Texas?
um, you mentioned, I mean, I steal your quote from earlier. I mean, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube at this point. I mean, I think, um, whether it's the protests, whether it's people being sick and tired of quarantining, um, frustration. I know we can, the frustration with jobs, frustration with the economy. Um, I don't know if there's any coming back, um, at least until the winter, at least in terms of being able to kind of lock things back down. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of frustrating, but there's also a little bit of, I don't want to call it hopefulness. Obviously, I'm hopeful everything works out. I don't want to see coronavirus cases spike all over the country because things are open back up. But there's maybe a bit of optimism from me that's like, if if we get a few weeks into this from now, and things are fairly stabilized, and things are not going absolutely crazy, could we have something to work with here? In terms of avoiding just a potential complete shutdown later on. Will the scientists know more about how this spreads? Will we be that closer to mitigation and treatment and all those things? So there's part of me that's kind of optimistic about it, but yeah, I mean, we're still right in the teeth of this. And I don't know. It's a weird feeling. I'm trying to be optimistic about it, but it's also,
I want to be
this could go
optimistic too.
terribly
Yeah,
wrong.
I want this to be great, and I think after all these protests this week, pardon me, I think we're really going to see, you know, if there's an outbreak here, because thousands of people have been gathering all over the
Right.
country for protests. The timing of that might, there's never, this is not, you can't pick the time for civil unrest. When it's time for that, it's time for that. And if we just happen to be in the middle of a pandemic, so we'll see the results of that here coming up over the next couple of weeks. And I think that will really truly shape the way that the rest of this summer goes. And as we get into the fall, we'll, how that starts to shape up as well. We'll see what happens after these couple of weeks of the protests.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, it's going to be interesting, especially, we talk about, we mentioned this about in Europe, the European soccer leagues, the Premier League starts in 11 days. It's starting back up, behind closed doors. June 11th for the Spanish leagues in 5 days. We've got it, it's all starting, whether we like it or agree with it or not. Everything, it's
Right.
opening back up. Things are starting, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes.
Well, and talking about opening back up, there's a season that wasn't being played as this started with, uh, in terms of this being in mid-season. That's Major League Baseball. They're not close, by the way. Major League Baseball and the Players Association are not close on coming back, whether it's money, games played. Uh, that might, baseball is one of those things where the players want to come back and play. It's not a situation like with soccer where they're being told these leagues are open. With baseball, the uncertainty behind revenue and salaries of players has created another divide, between Major League Baseball, the owners, and then the players. So, I mean, are we looking at another situation, Kerry, where the 94 strike, the strike of 94, where baseball lost a lot of fans and had to really rebuild back up with the trust of fans?
Yeah.
If they can't figure this out, are we looking at something that disastrous here?
Yeah, I think so. um, Baseball for the last few years has already been struggling with attracting young new fans. um, I mean, the demographics of who's watching baseball and all that kind of stuff, they don't lie. I mean, in terms of who considers themselves a big baseball fan, who's watching the games, all those kinds of things, World Series ratings, all those kinds of things. Like, baseball is not in a great spot to um, kind of just weather this and retain everybody. I mean, I think, you mentioned the 94 thing. Well, what happened after the 94 strike? It's the steroid scandal.
Steroid era.
Of a way to get people back interested in the game. And what bigger way to do that was the Barry Bonds or the Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire race, Barry Bonds hitting all the home run. Like, it was a way to get people in to watch the long ball and watch exciting baseball.
Chicks dig the long ball, that old campaign that MLB had, yeah.
Yeah, which you can maybe make the argument that ended up harming trust further down the road with people once that all got exposed.
Yeah.
Um,
But they were willing to trade that immediate impact for
Bingo.
losing the trust later on. They were willing to make that sacrifice. Are they willing to make that sacrifice now? I don't know, because of where they already are in the grand scheme of things. I'm going to watch baseball. I love baseball.
Yeah, we're baseball fans. Like,
Like
me and you are
they don't
baseball
have
fans.
to.
We're gonna watch it.
Right. They don't have to worry. When I used to work at a gym in town, and there were people that I always knew were people that, they were the people for that gym, and they would always support it no matter what. It wasn't those people that we had to worry about in terms of keeping their memberships. It's the people that you have to actually physically take care of as fans. And the
Yeah.
common fan, the casual fan of Major League Baseball is going to look at this and say, billionaires and millionaires are fighting over money again. All I want to do is watch baseball. I can find something else to do. I've been finding other things to do during this pandemic this spring. Screw baseball. I'm not going to spend my time watching it. It's in danger of happening.
Yeah, and it also doesn't help that the biggest off-season story, before coronavirus hit, was another cheating scandal. I mean,
Right.
it just continues to erode the trust of people that otherwise would maybe take an interest in baseball. But, like, we talk about one of the best kind of young teams of this however many past years, with the Astros, and kind of their legacy, um, not kind of, their legacy being tarnished
Right.
by this sign stealing and cheating scandal. It doesn't make me not an Astros fan. I love the Astros. That doesn't change. But, like, I mean, I'm not going to defend it. I mean, when that it is what it is. I'm not
Right.
sitting here defending it, but, like, I can absolutely see why, if you're trying to attract someone to the game, they go, for what? Like, why would I get it? Why would I get all that interested in, like, the World Series or a big playoff game or something of that sort, if there's kind of in the back of your mind, like, this isn't going to matter down the road anyway? Like, the kind of thing. Like, there, who knows what kind of shenanigans are happening.
Again, it's you show me who you are once, okay. You show me who you are twice, I'm not coming back. And that's like
Yeah.
that. They're in danger of that right now. And for the sake of baseball, again, I love baseball. I love playing fantasy baseball. I love statistics. I collect baseball cards. I grew up reading and memorizing statistics on the back of baseball cards like that. I'm not the one they need to worry about, obviously, but they do need to worry, because if they don't get some sort of season played quickly, and not just the fact that they need to get a season played, they need to put it out there. We talked about this last week or the week before. Putting something out there, giving somebody an expectation and knowing what to expect
Yeah.
from a league, knowing what's coming, puts fans at ease. And okay, I know when I'm going to be able to tune back in, to buy back into what's happening. Baseball's not giving themselves that opportunity, and it's going to cost them no matter what. It's just a matter of how much it's going to cost them.
No, and that's, especially as we had mentioned before, with the NHL's future plans of their season and potentially shifting around their season to maybe attract more eyeballs during the year. I know there's been talk about potentially the NBA doing similar. Like, baseball's position as being the sole dog during the spring and summer months, might not have that for much longer. And and that's where they really need to be careful about this and figure something out, because if, basically in the summer people go, well, yeah, of course I'm going to watch baseball, there's nothing else on. Like, and you're kind of casual fan or whatever, sports person might just, yeah, whatever, I'll put a baseball game on. But if they've got an NBA game, or, I mean, MLS, the growth of MLS in this country, um, or the NHL, okay, now they have some different options. Are they going to
Yeah.
tune into a 4-hour baseball game when they can put on a 90-minute MLS match, or, watch an NBA game?
People
MLB's
are
got to
very
figure this out.
people are finding a way, and this is reflected in ratings across not just sports but television in general. People are being very picky and choosy about the way that they spend their time and take in their media. And if you can't grab their attention and you can't keep them there, and another place is doing a better job, like some of the changes that I know the NHL are going to try to make the television experience more interactive and more interesting, to keep those people that might be casual and maybe don't understand it, and oh, that cool camera angle is going to keep me there because I saw this happen. It's the MLB is in danger of that happening because these other leagues are evolving.
Yep. Adapt or die.
Yep, exactly. So and okay, so lastly, I guess locally, uh, this country, what's the domestically is the word I was searching for there. So the G League, which is we used to be the D League, which is the developmental league for the NBA. The G League has canceled the remainder of their season, but the NBA's return has been voted on and approved. It's 22 teams in Orlando, just like we've discussed on this show before. We nailed that. We knew that that was going to be the best option. Everything that we read, everything that we took in, we knew that Orlando would be the best option. And it looks like that's where they're going to be, which oddly enough is also where the MLS is going to play their summer tournament because they've avoided lockout, and they're actually going to be in Orlando as well. But teams approved the plan 29-1. We talked about Damian Lillard saying that if it wasn't in the cards for the Trailblazers that he wasn't going to play, guess who that one team was that didn't vote for this plan?
Right. Yeah. The Portland Trailblazers. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, so basically one of the questions that I wanted to ask you on this, Kerry, was that means with only 22 teams going to play here, it's the top 8 teams from each conference and then 6 more teams added on. Should those other teams that are being left out, should they have a problem with this?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it gets tricky because it's almost kind of like with the NHL's deal of it admitting more teams than usually would be in the playoffs. There's this discussion of teams that are outside that bubble that go, well, hey, maybe we could have made a run in the last 8 games or something and got into one of those spots. I mean,
which is interesting because the 8 games, like you just said, that's the number of regular season games that the NBA is going to play out, and before they start the playoffs. Whereas when we talked about the NHL, they cut it off and they're starting their playoffs immediately. Yeah. So basically, It's almost like there's a play-in tournament to the playoffs with 8 regular season games. That those other teams, I'm guessing that 22 was the number because those other 8 teams had no chance at, getting a playoff berth at that point. So that's where the number that you land on. But I agree with you. I don't think that they have a case here. You weren't good enough with the games that you played. That's something that I've been consistent about, even when we talked about soccer leagues resuming, or if they were going to just cancel them all together. You weren't good enough in the games that have been played up to that point. So I'm sorry. You don't get to play. You don't get the exposure. Your players don't get to play. Sorry, it doesn't happen. And that's because you didn't play well enough at the beginning of the year. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the one little difference with the soccer, like at least the European soccer leagues, is that there's no playoff. I think to me that's the one big difference in that, if a team has a game in hand and they're 2 points back of first place, I understand that gripe of like, well, hey, if we can at least play our one more game, then maybe we win maybe this puts us in position to be champions.
Sure.
I think in a playoff system where they're basically already letting in more teams that would have gotten in. Right. If you aren't in that bonus group, you don't have it. Would they complain about that in a normal season?
Right. Well, we're not basically, because that's the way I'm looking at this, man. Is I'm looking at this as these are 22 teams that are in it's a playoff right now.
Yeah.
The playoffs start. There aren't eliminations.
Yeah.
But this is basically a play-in to the playoffs, and these are the teams that are eligible for it. And I think it's going to be great television. I think it's going to be great to follow. There's going to be tons of storylines in a short amount of time, and I think the NBA will be able to capitalize on it and really get some momentum building into what will be their actual playoff season.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think with that in the NHL, the formats that they're bringing that are so different than what we've seen before, it's going to be fresh and exciting, and all those descriptions that we can use. I think it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, and this is something when, these leagues like the NBA can maybe look at something down the road where maybe we don't need to play 82 games just a regular season. Maybe we play 72 games. And then if you're under a certain place in the standings, you get to play a bunch of, you get to either do this or, you get to play a consolation bracket or whatever it is. And I know with the arena scheduling, that might be difficult to do, but I think that this could be something that the NBA could look at doing long term as like a play-in to the playoffs. That would get more eyes. You would get more teams in. I think more teams into this because it doesn't technically have to be. You don't have to call it the playoffs. It's not the playoffs, but there is
playoffs.
Yeah, you kidding me? But there's a way to go about this where I think the NBA has an opportunity to hold on to some of these adjustments that they're making to improve their systems moving forward, to keep eyes on them and to keep people talking. I
Yeah,
think
I
there's
think
an
we've seen
opportunity.
that across, well, everybody besides Major League Baseball, around the world, sports-wise, basically reevaluating a lot of the entire situation because of coronavirus. And I think this has provided an opportunity for um, leagues to go, well, hey, maybe we can. This is an opportunity, maybe change things up a little bit. Let's try something. Let's do something a little outside of our comfort zone, which we,
Yeah,
and do that. And I think
why
it'll be
not?
interesting to see what sticks.
Nobody's gonna be mad at you for trying something right now.
Yeah,
You know, you have nothing to lose at this point. Like throw all the shit up against the wall and see what sticks. Why not? You don't have anything to lose.
right, exactly. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see, like, in a few years from now, what things stuck from what these leagues and, around the world just, kind of changed up from this. And it's exciting to kind of just see this, the novelty in a way, if you will, of, you know, these leagues and teams and everything, that how they're functioning. So it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, they have the plan laid out. You know, mid June, players from outside the U.S. are coming back to their home markets. June 21st, everybody's back in their home markets. June 22nd, testing for COVID-19 begins. Pardon me, training camp begins on June 30th. A week later, everybody goes to Orlando, and then July 31st, the season resumes. We still have a long way to go before this season gets started again. There's a lot that can change. There's a lot that can happen in the next 7 or 8 weeks. So obviously the NBA putting out this plan was important. We'll see if they can stick with it. I hope they can, because I like the plan. I think it's a good idea. Oh yeah, I forgot about this. They're saying that there are going to be a couple of exhibition games, which is good, but they might pipe in crowd noise using NBA 2K. I
I
mean,
mean, why not?
I mean, it's one of those things where I think why not just still have like the DJ, that's over at the table, and then when you're on defense, even if there's not a crowd, you still get the
Yeah,
where the crowd would say defense. You just have that. I guess I'm not against the 2K stuff. I just I watch soccer games, and we had this conversation where
yeah.
they pipe in crowd noise. It's weird, but I guess it doesn't bother me. I don't need it, but I guess it doesn't bother me.
I
What do
think
you
the
think?
2K thing's interesting because it would be, I mean, depending on how they get it set up, I mean, I think it would be pretty in tune with what's happening on the court. That could be interesting.
Yeah, could be.
Um, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that works. That might they might do have a couple of games of that and be like, all right, that didn't.
But again, try it now. You know, try it. Nobody's going to get
Well, that's
mad
the
at
whole
these leagues
point.
for
Yeah,
putting themselves out there. Just try it. Who cares if it fails? If it flops, okay, we're done. We tried it. We
exactly.
thought it would work. Who cares?
Exactly. That's the whole point. Is like, yeah, it's enabling, it's empowering these teams and leagues to kind of go, screw it, let's try something different. Why not? What do you have to lose?
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean, we'll see. The fans they'll let everybody know what they think of the crowd noise and how that stuff
Yeah.
goes. They'll speak out on it, and if they don't like it,
Exactly.
well, they'll do
Yeah.
something different. But
Well, and you mentioned earlier, Kerry, you brought up a good point about how some of these leagues are changing and how the schedules of these leagues uh, might change permanently due to this, and that all leagues are taking a look at everything at this point. So with the way that this is laid out, the plan would be that the 2021 season, so next basketball season when it would start, the plan right now would be that it would start in December as opposed to October or early November, I believe, is when the NBA. They're pushing it back at least a month. I've always said they don't need to play basketball until after Christmas anyway. And so, is that something that you think they'll explore and just keeping it that way and starting
yeah,
in December or later even?
yeah, I think so. I mean, I know that the NHL's talked about that, about starting like starting in the winter, whether that's December or January. I mean, I know the NBA's made a big push to make their Christmas games their big marquee games during the year, Christmas Day games, big
Right.
matchups, all that. What a better way to kick off your season?
It still could be, absolutely.
That could be the best for the NBA to go, all right, it's Christmas Day. Here's opening day of the season. and
Yeah.
still carry those big games like that, and then carry it on into the spring and wrap up in the summer. Um, I I think they'd have to. A lot of these teams share buildings, so
Right.
I think that would just make sense to have NHL and NBA seasons shifted out. I mean, because if we're being real about it, the entire fall, whether it's all kinds of sports media, probably will be on this show, whether it's sports radio, ESPN, Fox Sports, whatever it is. The fall is all football. Every discussion on every show around the country is revolving around NFL and college football during the fall. Um, if there's a big story in the fall in the NBA, that'll make its way in. The NHL is non-existent in that discussion,
Right.
and that's kind of how it is. If those two sports could start after Christmas, they have the calendar themselves, minus the Super Bowl and a few NFL playoff games and college playoffs in January. That's
But
it.
that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, you look at it though. You launch real big, and the regular season's finishing up in around Christmas time for the NFL. There's a lot of buzz around that too. But it's Christmas Day. You already do it anyway. You put the big marquee Christmas Day games on. You go about your business. People stop caring about you again for a couple of weeks until the stuff is over. But you can at least still be a part of that conversation. You can still, and then you have more time to yourself to really
Exactly.
build the momentum. So when the playoffs don't come around, it's not like, well, I haven't watched any NBA because the NFL was going on, and then this is going. Oh, okay, I guess I'll start watching the NBA. Your fans will buy in earlier because you will be the show in town, right? You'll be the only show in town a lot earlier, and it'll allow you to get more eyes on you that way, in my opinion, anyway. So I think it's something they should absolutely think about keeping.
Yeah, I mean, I know, just thinking of a quick example of that. Like I'm in DFW. I'm sure the Cowboys dominate much of the sports talk radio throughout the fall, if not most of the year.
Of
But then I
course,
know the NFL has the draft and free agency and stuff that takes up the airwaves in the spring. But the Stars and the Mavs probably have a really hard time getting airplay in the fall on DFW sports outlets.
of course, yeah,
Mavs and Stars would have essentially the airwaves to themselves in the spring and into the summer. I know the Rangers probably carry a little bit of that too, but like at that point, the Stars and Mavs are kind of speaking over the Rangers there. And that's why I think it'd be wise for both of those leagues to really take a good hard look at it, because I just think it makes sense. I mean,
yeah.
they're
No,
they're not
it,
talked about for half the year because everybody wants to talk about the Cowboys. So,
right. Well, exactly, and nationally as well. Those leagues in general,
yep.
everybody's at whatever level it is. DFW, because it's the Cowboys, it's even more amplified, like you were saying. But
Yeah.
across the country, that's the thing. It's get yourself more exposure. Put yourself in a time to where you actually have more eyes on you, and you're not trying to pull people away from. You're not fighting a losing battle, because they're not going to pull eyes away from the NFL. It's not happening. Sorry. So make more time for yourself to where you're the only show in town. I think that's the way they ought to go. I agree.
Well, Jay, what are you thinking? You want to hit a breakfast wrap here, or what you got?
Yeah, man. Let's do a little breakfast wrap up the show for today. So a little more Texans talk. Texans special teams coordinator Brad Seeley is retiring after 31 seasons as a coach in the NFL. So he took over for Houston special teams in 2018. According to Football Outsiders, in 2017 they were ranked special teams was ranked 26th. He took over in 2018. They were ranked 5th. 2019 season special teams was ranked 4th. He obviously made a difference in that unit. So I'm anxious to see how Bill O'Brien and the rest of the organization come around. That there is another assistant coach on staff that has also uh, been in the league for a long time. That the name is escaping me right now, but I believe they may even look to promote from within there. But it's a big loss for a team that, when it comes down to it, has shot themselves in the foot on multiple occasions in one phase of the game or the other, and really has to win the special teams battle in order to be
Yeah.
successful. So that's a big loss.
Did he? Who called that fake punt against KC? Well, honestly, was that O'Brien's call, or did
I
Seeley
think
make that call?
I'm pretty sure it was O'Brien's call, and we
Okay.
can follow back up on that. But I'm 95% sure that was O'Brien's call to make there.
Okay.
We'll look it up. But point being that by at least one metric, the special teams all as a whole have improved over the past couple of years underneath this guy as a coach.
No, they were no doubt. They were the punting game was better. They were more reliable on kicking extra points and field goals, and so no, there's no question there. It's just still that stupid playoff game and that fake punt. Just every time I hear Texans special teams, I just go, oh yeah, that fake punt that worked.
Well, you see, I
Um,
try to block it out of my mind, so it took you bringing it up again because every time I think about it, it makes me wonder.
Sorry, I didn't mean to ruin your Saturday,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks a lot.
what else we got in the breakfast wrap here? Let's see. We got a NFL considering asking players to take a pay cut if the revenue drops, which it's we've talked about this before. What the NFL is looking at revenue wise with coronavirus, they're gonna there's gonna be a revenue drop. Nobody's gonna be in the stadium for a while,
Right.
if not full capacity at least. So yeah, there's gonna be revenue loss.
Yeah. Players are going to have to take a pay cut. They're going to have to figure it out in a fair way, and they're going to have to take a pay cut. Period. I don't think that there's any way to go about it. But how the NFL handles this, again, in the light of everything else that's going on and the statements that the NFL has recently made, that this is all a part of it. You know, this is going to go a long way to paying people what they're worth and the perceived value of a person as an asset to a team or to an entity or to a league. I think this is going to play a big part in the financial negotiations here. I think the players will have to give a little bit, but I think also that we may be surprised with the result of this. What do you think?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be revenue cut, and I think they'll be understanding. I think they'll work it out. I think it'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm
I
with
think
you.
it's
Last,
like you said. I think it's a chance for them to kind of um, reset the table a little bit, and players can start getting what they're worth. And I think it'll work out.
I agree. No, I agree 100%. Last thing, man. So Oklahoma State was just hit with a 1-year postseason ban for the corruption case that was going on involving them, and it's Oklahoma State. Okay, there's a 10-year show cause clause on that coach. What is it called? A show hire? What? It's just called a
Show
show
clause, I
hire.
think. Yeah, show
Whatever
clause
it is,
maybe.
that guy can't. That guy has that for 10 years. The coach that is the reason for this investigation and the reason for this punishment. But there's bigger fish to fry in terms of violations, level 1 violations, level 2 violations, things that we've covered on the show, and that's Kansas. Oh, in terms of blue bloods and big names in college basketball is among the biggest. So what do you think is going to happen if Oklahoma State got hit with a 1-year suspension from postseason play, a 1-year ban? And there were some other things as well with it, but that was the big part. How do you think this is going to hit Kansas?
They might lose a couple scholarships.
Damn it. It's unfortunate, but it's like there's so many people watching though right now, man. Do you think the NCAA can really just pull this shit again like they pulled with North Carolina, like they pulled, is it going to happen again in front of our eyes? Like, are they not going to punish
No,
Kansas?
no, I don't think they will. I'd be shocked if they did. I
I
hate
hate
saying
that.
that. I just think
Well,
I,
I
I
hate
think
that
that's going
you're
to be the
right.
case. Yeah. Well,
I
I just think they're going to hit with. They'll probably take away a couple scholarships. I don't think the NCAA wants Kansas to not be in the tournament.
oh no. I mean,
Yeah.
even though that they sort of have they've earned a reputation as a team that constantly underperforms their seeds in these big tournaments. They're still the name. They're still Kansas, and they still bring a lot of eyes to the television when they are there. So, unfortunately, I didn't want to think that because it's out there. There's so much out there right now. All of these things that are out in the light that Kansas has done wrong. And I really hope you're wrong.
I hope so too.
Not from a sense of being a Texas basketball fan and that's the Big 12 conference, because I don't care. It's just
Yeah.
like, this is just one of those things where it's another instance of the haves and the have-nots, the privileged and not privileged. It's Kansas versus Oklahoma State in terms of basketball prestige and who's going to win out there. So you're probably right. I hope they get the book thrown at them, and I still think that something will happen, but unfortunately, it's probably not going to be a true punishment fitting of the crimes, I guess, if you will, that they
No.
committed.
No, I think we'll end up being sorely disappointed with however it plays out. But
How come you're right about stuff like this all the time, man?
I'm cynical.
Yeah, well, I mean, with good. With good reason, man. With good reason.
Well,
So,
man,
but that's all I got for the wrap, man. I think that's it for today.
well, I think it's a good show. Not everybody might agree with everything that we've had to say here, and that's fine. Um, but it's how we feel. And, you know, I just before we go, just want to say, I know that there's a lot of people that feel like that they should be doing something. They want to do something to help, but maybe they're not comfortable going to protest. They're not comfortable with certain, you know, I, I, I can just say, doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter, any of those kinds of things. There's something you can do. There's always something, whether that's donating to a cause, that's, supporting, different communities around the country or different aspects. There's always, you can do that. You can, um, just be an advocate. If someone says something stupid, call them out on it. Help change the conversation. Um, Anybody can play a role in this to help make this country and this world a better place for all of us to be able to live. Not just enjoy sports and all that kind of stuff, but to live. And that's what. Don't be. If anybody's watching and not sure what to do, it's simple stuff. Simple stuff. If you've hung with us this long to this point on the show today, then you're probably thinking along the same lines that we are. And you know I don't know. I don't have too much else to say besides that, but just everybody can provide something. You don't have to be at the protest. You don't have to you know be out in front of everything. There's a lot of work to be done behind the scenes and a lot of ways to help change this country and change the world without, you don't have to be out there. So
Kerry, all I will say right now is we can do better, we must do better, and we will do better. Thanks for sticking
absolutely.
around with us, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, man.
See you next week. Thanks everybody.
ATX representing. Fatal, baby.